Okay, so doing a review video, something we go over in class occasionally, but can't spend much time on, so I thought I'd make a video. It's just adding positive and negative numbers, really, but I'm going to use integers, but it works the same way with fractions or decimals. So if you have a negative number, it's going to be a little wobbly, but that's all right. And you have a positive number. Each of these is really just made up of a bunch of positive ones or negative ones. Or if it was a negative fraction, like let's say negative 3/4, that would just be made up of a bunch of smaller negative pieces. A little bit harder to do the negative fraction, but I'm going to focus on the integers, but again, concept is the same for fractions. So anyway, so this -5 that we have right here, it is made up, like I said, of a bunch of negative ones. I'll erase this while I'm trying to work. Oh boy, this is going to be wobbly. We'll get through this one though. Alright, so if I have -5, it's really just the same thing as -1, -1, oh, I'm sorry, negatives. Okay, got it. There we go. -1, -1, then another -1, and another -1, and another -1. So I have 5 negative ones that makes up this -5 number right here. So basically I just have a total of -5. Now for +2, it's the same thing, only these are positive ones. So we have a +1, +1. I'll try to write bigger so you can see it on the screen a little bit better. So anyway, when we combine a positive and a -1, so I'll do that down, actually I'll do it up here real quick. So a +1 combined with a -1, if we put those two together, addition is combining things. So I take a pile of positive ones, or in this case just one +1 and one -1. If I smush those together, they cancel each other out and they become 0. So if you don't know that, or if you don't understand the concept, just think about money. If I give you $1 and then I take $1, which is the same thing as giving you a $, then you're back at 0. Or we can do it the opposite way. If you go into debt, like you borrow $1, so you're -$1. If somebody then gives you $1, you're really just back to where you were, because you have to give that $1 away to whoever you owe it to. So you're just back to 0. Think of a board game. If you're playing a board game and you're on space 0 and you get a card that says move forward 1 step, so you get a +1. Well, now you're on the first space. But then if your next card is move back -1, then now you're back at 0. So +1, or football is the same way. If you're on the 0-yard line, you gain a yard, you're on the 1-yard line, you lose a yard, you're back on the 0-yard line. So again, you've got to understand this concept right here. +1 plus -1 cancels out, becomes 0. All right, so with that in mind, we can now say, okay, well, if I have this pile, and again, if you've ever used the red and yellow counting coins, I like thinking of this as a pile of ones. So you've kind of got this little pile of ones sitting here. They're all negative ones, though. So in this case, you've got a pile of negative ones, and they add up to be 5 negative ones, or -5. Well, over here I have a smaller pile, and that's an important thing to remember. It's a smaller pile because there's only 2 of them, but they're positive, so I had a +2 is what I started with in this. So again, when we add positive and negative numbers, we are going to just put all of these together. We're going to combine them and put them in one pile. But what's going to happen when we do that is, in our pile, some of these positive and negative ones are going to cancel out, just like we were talking about in the examples. Football, play on a game board, or just this in general. +1 combined with -1 is 0. So when I combine these, again, combining means addition, one of these cancels out with one of these. Well, then another one of these cancels out with another one of these. So now all I have left in this pile Actually, I could have written them all down here. 1, positive 1, and then I had all these negative ones in the same pile. So again, I just pushed them all into one pile together. Well, in this pile, just like I said up here, these two can cancel out. These two can cancel out, so these add up to 0, so they really just go away. These add up to 0, so they just really go away. All I'm left now in my pile is I have 3 negative 1s, which basically means if I just do the math on that, 1, 2, 3 negative 1s, just means negative 3. So when I combine, or when I add negative 5 plus positive 2, the end result is negative 3. So here's the general rule for this. Whenever you are adding positive and negative integers, and we'll deal with subtraction in another video. When you're adding positive and negative integers, you just think, well, which pile is going to be the biggest pile? In this case, my biggest pile was negative 5. Because I had 5 of them here, only 2 of them here. The pile that is bigger is going to be the pile that has some left over after a bunch of them cancel out. So that means the sign is always going to come from whichever pile is bigger. So this pile was bigger, so my sign wound up being negative. As far as this number part goes, all you're doing is you're just saying, okay, well, how many coins or how many ones are going to be left over after a bunch of them cancel out? This number part, it just always comes from the difference between the number of coins that you start with here. Again, coins is the same thing as the individual negative ones. So it's just the difference between I started with 5 of these over here and I started with 2 over here. So I'm going to wind up having 3 left. So again, the sign comes from the biggest pile. The number just comes from how many are going to be left over after a bunch of them cancel out.